I'm going to talk about three theories of deviance, those being labeling theory, structural strain, sometimes known as anomie theory, and differential association theory. Now, there are several other theories. I certainly think about broken windows. I think about what's known as routine activities theory. And you will have opportunities to learn about those and others in a sociology of criminal justice or a sociology of crime and deviance class. But for here and now, we're going to focus on these three. You see the names of scholars, Robert Becker, Robert Merton, Edward Sutherland, Donald Cressy, beside each of these theories. And if you want to go into further detail, learn about these theories in greater depth, you are, of course, free to look into the research of either or any of those gentlemen. But as for an assessment in this class, I'm not going to hold you responsible for knowing which theory is associated with which scholar. Let's focus on the merits of the theory here, beginning with labeling theory. My caption for this theory, and for each of these three theories, I have included a caption for you to hopefully get your mind on the right track when you think about or begin to apply this theory. So for labeling theory, my caption is you are what they say you are. This theory focuses primarily on agents of social control. Agents of social control being the people who have the power or are in a position to determine what is or is not deviant. Agents of social control are going to be the people and sometimes institutions who provide the stakes in conformity. We sometimes say, the agents of social control provide reasons or incentives to follow along with social norms. So agents of social control are going to be people who are in a position to decide what is deviant, and in a position to decide or determine which people or which types of people are likely to be targeted and blamed. This theory, labeling theory, holds that deviance occurs because agents of social control attach stigmatizing labels or stereotypes to people or groups. Agents of social control, to give examples of this, could be a judge, a probation officer, a police officer, but then moving beyond the realm of criminal justice like that, agents of social control could also be your mom or dad, whoever the head of your household is. An agent of social control could be your manager, your supervisor at your job. An agent of social control could be your coach or the leader of a team or organization that you belong to. Agents of social control are the people and sometimes the institutions that are in a position to decide what's okay and what's not, to decide what's deviant, what is in violation of norms and what is not. I'm skipping down, on the notes here, but you see that the central idea behind labeling theory is that what makes an act deviant is not necessarily the act itself, but rather the response to that act. We could have two individuals doing the exact same thing, right? We could have two individuals either behaving the same way, with the same appearance, some of the same viewpoints and attitudes, but agents of social, excuse me, agents of social control, not agents of socialization, agents of social control might be more likely to label one of those people as deviant. Might be more likely to single out or label, hence labeling theory, might be more likely to label one of those individuals as deviant or breaking the rules, not doing what they're supposed to do. We'll talk about why that can be the case. You see in the notes here stigmas. Stigmas are terms or labels that are intended to discredit or devalue someone. Stigmas can be both an outcome and a cause of labeling. Someone is labeled as deviant, so then some of these labels might be more applicable, or other people in the setting might be more comfortable using these stigmatizing terms around them. So in that case, stigmas can be an outcome of labeling, but stigmas can also cause labeling or lead to further labeling as well. What makes something a stigma is that it has the effect of discrediting or devaluing someone or some particular group. You see examples listed there in parentheses. All of those terms are stigmatizing in the sense that they support the impression that whoever is labeled or identified in such a way, they are less than or they are inferior to. They are less important than someone else, perhaps less worthy of fair or equal treatment than someone else. If we call someone a fatso, and hopefully, we would never call someone that. But if we call someone that, we're not only making a statement about their physical appearance or their body figure, but we might also be saying, even if not deliberately, it could be, we could be interpreted as suggesting that that individual is not, taking themselves seriously or as seriously as perhaps they should. If they don't care about their health, if they don't care about their figure, their physique, then, why should I? Or then, why should other people? You see some of the other terms on there, terms like bipolar and schizo, terms that have their, basis in mental health conditions. Someone might call another individual bipolar or refer to them as a schizo as a way to suggest that, their opinion doesn't matter. Maybe they don't need to be taken seriously. Oh, well, they're saying this right now, but wait a day. Heck, wait 20 minutes. They might say or think something different, right? We don't need, we perhaps don't need to take their opinions all that seriously. Same with calling someone or some group of people illegal. Now, yes, there are people who, are residing in the country without an authorized status. But if you refer to someone as illegal, that suggests that, their personhood, their being is not permissible under the law. It suggests that they do not have certain rights or should not have access to certain opportunities. And in certain instances, when we talk about certain, rights or opportunities, or the right, to get a driver's license, or to take a certain job, yeah, that might in fact be the case. But all individuals do have, all individuals, regardless of, their residency status within this country, do have certain rights. The right to a public education up until, the age of 18, or the right to, not be subjected to, criminal behavior. If we call someone illegal, we're suggesting, they don't have or are not eligible for these protections. Okay, so that can be a stigmatizing term as well. When someone is labeled in such a way, or when someone is called one of these stigmatizing terms, or once that stigma is applied to them, people will oftentimes attempt to challenge that, attempt to resist it. No, no, I'm not, bipolar. No, I'm not, whatever, someone is calling them. If we're accused of a deviant act, maybe we are accused of cheating on an exam. Maybe we're accused of uh, dressing in a manner that is not appropriate. Right? Many people are often going to attempt to challenge that. They're going to resist that label, like, no, I was not cheating on the exam. Why do you believe that I was? Or, my manner of dress, is consistent with how other people are dressed. Or there's no rule specifying that I could not dress this way. People will often attempt to challenge or, resist that label. They'll try to not be stigmatized, as deviant, right? They'll try to not be subject to that label. Over time, however, for some people, they might internalize that label. You see in the notes, I say that once labeled or stereotyped, people's behavior changes. Some people might get defensive. I've said people might challenge that label. They might challenge that they're acting deviantly. They might not agree with that. They don't want to be seen as a lawbreaker. or a weirdo. They don't want to be seen as you know a thug, a ne'er-do-well, whatever the case might be. They resist that. Others, however, they internalize this, meaning it becomes a part of their self-concept. People might realize that, well, these ways of perceiving me, they're out there. Other people look at me this way. They might come to realize that no matter what they say, no matter what they do, other people are going to perceive this way. We see this sometimes in the realm of the criminal justice system with people who kind of embrace this notion that they are a career criminal or a crook by the book, so to speak. Maybe they have multiple criminal convictions. They realize when they apply for jobs, these convictions might make it more difficult for them to be hired, more difficult to even get an interview, perhaps. No matter what I do, I'm going to be perceived as a felon, or I'm going to be perceived as a convict. With that label, with the internalization of that label, they might act in a manner that is consistent with that label. I'm looking for a job, but I have these criminal convictions. I've filled out, 50 applications, 100 applications, maybe even more than that, but I'm not even getting callback. I'm not even getting interviews. It might, over time, they might say, well, people view me a certain way. No matter what I do, I'm going to be perceived this way. It might be easier for me to go back to whatever led to them being convicted of those crimes in the first place. I might go back to selling drugs. I might, it'd be easier for me to, uh, you know, steal car parts and sell them. It'd be easier for me to engage in acts of identity theft than it would be to try to get one of these jobs, which I'm clearly, not getting caught. I'm not having success in applying for these jobs. And even if I do get these jobs, maybe the boss would, be on extra lookout for me, knowing that I have these criminal convictions. A self-fulfilling prophecy takes place when someone acts in a manner that is consistent with the way they've been labeled and consistent with the way that they have perhaps been stigmatized. Someone, maybe they get out of prison, they have to go to a halfway house. One of the terms of living in that halfway house is that maybe they have to have a job. They might be given, a month to find a job. But again, having just come out of prison, that might be difficult. Halfway houses tend to be located in neighborhoods where there's not a lot of jobs available. So, maybe there's a program, gets them a bus pass, or, maybe they have a friend who's able to drive them to some of these places, pick up an application or go for the interview if they're fortunate enough to get an interview. But, I'm living in a neighborhood that's far away from the jobs. I'm, perceived as a felon. It's difficult to get these jobs. I need some money. The world, other people view me as a convict or a felon. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to shed that label. So some people might, over time, begin to act in a manner that is consistent with that label. So labeling theory, again, the emphasis is on agents of social control. You know, police officers, teachers, parents, uh, you know, therapists. What are they likely to single out as being deviant? Two individuals can do the exact same things, behave in the same manner, but one, maybe they've got a bunch of tattoos on their face or their neck or their hands. Maybe they are a convicted felon. Maybe they come from a neighborhood. Maybe they live in a neighborhood that is perceived as having problems with certain types of crime, be it drug trafficking or certain gang-related crimes. Certain people, for certain reasons, might be more likely to be labeled as deviants. Labeling theory, once again, says that what makes an act deviant is not necessarily the act itself, but the response to that act from the agents of social control.